Hi, I'm Ashley Hart. I'm a realtor here in DFW, and today we're going to be going through the Realtor subreddit looking for some of the best/worst realtor horror stories. All right, let's get started. I was talking to my client and she was saying that her grandma died at 89. I said, "What a great age to die." My client started tearing up. I'm so awkward. Yeah. Yeah. Things that you should not say. What a great age to die. No, do not say that to a client or a friend or anybody who has lost somebody special to them. Don't do that. Okay, next, my very first client ever, after getting my license, brought his 16-year-old son along. I picked them up since we were looking at a couple houses. On the way to the first house, not even 10 minutes in, the son gets car sick, doesn't say anything, tries to open the window quick, and puke at 55 miles an hour. The detailer had to remove the seats and door panels to clean that one up. They never called me back. I don't do vomit. I'm just gonna leave it at that. I don't do vomit. Even if they had called me back, I'm not sure that I would call them back. No. Milk and vomit, side note, milk and vomit are smells that never come out of a car. And I know this from being in the car industry, and we have gone all the way down to removing the seats, removing the carpet, removing the jute beneath the carpet, all the way down to the metal frame. I had one time where a client's child leaned forward, got sick around the prindle, the gear shift, and it went down all the way into that, and they ended up trading in the car because we couldn't get the smell out. So, no. Recently had to drop a client. Being fairly new, it was a hard decision to make, but you make it impossible for me to do my job. What's the point? I'm basically volunteering my time. I showed the client about a dozen houses. He put offers on 4, no complaints there. The problem was that he felt that everything was negotiable. Our market is crazy and there's multiple offers on basically everything. I made sure to tell him repeatedly that all offers had to be best and final. When he would lose out on a house, he would try to get me to offer more money, not understanding that it had been sold to somebody else, despite repeated explanations. Repeat this process for 3 houses. Finally, I get an offer accepted for him, 15 offers on the house. He demands that I try to negotiate down $10,000. Not an option, buddy. Then he wants all the appliances but refuses to compensate for them. Then he wants to bring a relative to see the house before allowing his attorney to approve. I warned him that the seller would back out. He didn't listen. They did. Suddenly he wants to sign. What? Refuses to understand that they've moved on to the next buyer, as I told him that would happen. I realized that this could go on for months and he'd possibly never follow through. I'd rather not take time away from my family for someone who refuses to be helped. Unpopular opinion here, but it sounds like maybe expectations weren't clearly defined in the beginning. And I think that that's such a critical part of buyer representation and buyer consultation, is making sure that you're having those conversations up front, because he could have mitigated that entire situation. Now, with regards to unrealistic sellers, we've all had them. There is a component to that too. So maybe this agent did everything they were supposed to do and this client is just not savable, and Godspeed, sir. All right, had a buyer demand a 4 a.m. home inspection. Also threatened to kill a deal the week of the settlement because he wanted to push back a day to better suit his extremely flexible work schedule. What? I'm going to speak for Texas contracts here, and we as buyers have rights to access the home during reasonable hours. 4 a.m. is not reasonable for anybody. I don't care what kind of work schedule you have. Nobody as a seller is going to accommodate a 4 a.m. inspection. Sorry, sir. I'm a newer agent. First showing, and I was turning the lights off when the clients were out front, and I decided to take a quick number 2. I hear footsteps on the roof, and the next thing I know, the buyer is staring at me through the skylight. True story. I've since shown them 30 houses. They finally made an offer. It was $100,000 below the asking price at $250,000. 2 terrible stories in one. I think every agent out there has some type of poop story. It was either during an open house, it was during a showing, you were late to a showing, maybe you didn't have toilet paper because the house was vacant. There is not an agent in this business that has not experienced some level of humiliation regarding poop and clients. And so Jake plus 5 zeros, I feel you. And I'm so sorry that happened to you, because that is, well, that's pretty bad. I had a seller who questioned everything I did. It was almost like he was trying to catch me being bad at my job. That was the first time I'd worked with someone who didn't fully trust me, and it sucked. Yeah, but I came out of it more experienced, so I can't complain. Meanwhile, my ex-husband was so trusting when I sold his house. We had spent 10 years barely able to speak to each other unless it was for our child's sake. But as soon as the ink dried on the listing agreement, he was the most helpful and compliant seller I'd ever had. My buyers have all been amazing, like seriously amazing. I actually miss their company once the deal is done. That's sweet. That's how I feel about my people too. And I guess it's because we spend a lot of time together over a short period of time. It absolutely makes my day when they reach out with pics of their renovations and such. That's the dream, right? Like you create such a strong bond with your people. Not only do they trust you through the process, but they want to stay in connection with you and they want you to experience their joy in their new home. And likewise, you want to be part of that because that's how you get repeat and referral business, and staying engaged and being part of their life without really trying is the best way to do it. Love the ex-husband comment. I think that's a super interesting dynamic. Can't comment on that. I'm glad that one went well. And the seller who questioned everything that you did, that's hard, right? That's a hard place to be because your fiduciary duty is to the seller and you want to respect their opinion, of course, but also they hired you because you're the expert. And so make sure that when you come into that relationship, you establish that credibility and authority and all of that, because if you don't and you let them take it from the beginning, then they're not trusting you to do the job that they've hired you to do. And that's a really tough place to be. I just fired my client. If real estate agents can be fired, so should bad clients. I don't think she's stable. She wanted to rent her place, finally found her a good tenant, and she decides she doesn't want to rent. Then 15 minutes, decides she does. Then nope, doesn't. Now she wants to sell. But then she decides she could do a 6-month rental. Finally, I put my foot down and said, you have to make a decision or you're wasting everyone's time. 5 calls, 50 messages later, she agrees to sign the offer, but it expires. Then the agent has to send a new offer, which I made sure she was prepared to sign, only to get a message, I changed my mind. I was livid, understandably. I told her I can't work with her and I sent her a cancellation agreement only to be asked, can you sell my place? Which I answered in a more polite way, HE double hockey sticks no. P.S. She's being sued by a former company she used to rent her place. Shocking. What's your story, everyone? Do share. I'm gonna agree with you that she probably was not competent to make that decision. I don't know what the situation was, but it sounds like she's either super indecisive, super scared about what the outcome could be, or not capable of making that decision in that moment. So I think you protected yourself and your reputation there. I fired a very wealthy client because he wouldn't stop making misogynistic jokes and sending me screenshots of vacant land or random addresses that aren't for sale and asking me to find the owners and offer them less than market value for their homes. I can't believe I put up with him for 8 months. Are we sure that wasn't like a fraud situation? Because we're seeing a lot of situations where buyers are attempting to purchase land. They're representing themselves as the seller of the vacant land. And they're contacting agents, and agents are doing the research like we're supposed to establish the owners. But these people, these frauds, are claiming to be those owners. And so if you don't dig deep enough, it just gets really messy and land gets almost all the way through title. Sometimes they even close. There's lots of lawsuits out there. Anyways, it's a huge mess. Lots and lots of fraud in real estate. And this immediately sends up a red flag to me because misogynistic jokes, that's its own issue. But the vacant land and random addresses that aren't for sale, be careful. Red flag. Sometimes they're little tiny red flags. It's like a big red flag, okay? All right. I am going to leave out details to keep this short. I met a flipper at a FSBO, for sale by owner, as a new agent and immediately found a distressed home for sale not being publicly advertised anywhere in a really nice neighborhood. Another agent in my office told me about it. Neither the seller nor my client wanted to pay a commission, so I just said, hey, you work out on your own, and I just appreciate the opportunity to list with you once you flip it. The client was increasingly appearing nuts to me, so I started keeping my distance, but would check in periodically. So like months after I put them in touch, I'm like, are you good? Did you start the flip yet? My client says to me, do you think I can ask for $10K off our agreed upon price? Because I want to add a patio? I was like, no, are you freaking serious? And you haven't closed yet 4 months later. Seller gets sick of being jerked around by this guy and finds another buyer. $200,000 house, maybe $75,000 worth of work, had some mold issues, and was sold for $400,000 once rehabbed. I was so mad, I wish I had just bought it and flipped it myself. And then that client still kept hitting me up to find more deals, and I was like, nah, bro. And when I realized, don't let people waste your time. I I don't even know what to say to that one. I have my own opinions on that, but I'll keep it to myself in the interest of preserving relationships. What's the worst client you've had? This one should be amusing. I'll start. A couple years ago, I started to take Zillow leads. They say they confirm that the clients have an agent or that they don't. I get a call from a new potential client wanting to see a home about an hour away from me on a Sunday afternoon. Halfway there, he calls to let me know he's going to be about 15 minutes late and that his agent told him the area was closer than he thought. The following conversation ensues. Me: so you have an agent? Him: yes, my agent doesn't work on Sunday, and he told me to go to Zillow to get someone there to show me. Me: okay, well, we can do a couple things now. You can call your agent and tell him to call me, and I will show you the home for him for a fee. Or if you want to call someone to show you homes on Sundays and he will not, you can terminate with him, and I'm happy to take you on. Ooh, be careful with that one. Don't do that one. Him: I just want to see the house. I'll be there in 45 minutes. Me: you do not understand. If you intend to pay him, he needs to do the work. There's no reason for me to blow 3 hours on a Sunday afternoon for nothing. Don't respond like that to a client either. Him: I don't care. I just want to see the house. Choice words left out. Me: he's your agent. Tell him to get out there and show it to you. Him: all caps: I just want to see the effing house. I don't care about any of this. This repeated a few times, and I finally said, me: I'll tell you what, my lawn needs to be mowed. How about you drive an hour to my place and mow my lawn? Then I'll drive an hour to show you the house. Him: why the F would I do that? Me: why would I drive an hour each way and show you a house when you aren't my client or my friend? You aren't gonna pay me. Him: F this, click. Cue entitlement. I can't wait until we are obligated to have a signed buyer's rep before opening the first door. Okay, so this is an old one, obviously. There is now a rule per the National Association of Realtors that we have to have a signed buyer representation in place before we can open a door. So that mitigates a lot of this. But what we were seeing before that was in place is exactly what he was talking about. Agents that didn't work or were too busy or whatever the case may be, and they just sent their clients to Zillow to schedule a showing, and these Zillow agents paid for the leads and the right to gain access to these clients, only to find out that the clients were already under representation. And once you're under representation, we can't do anything with that. And so I, for one, am happy to see that this situation is being mitigated, because that's terrible. I don't agree with how he responded to the client, nor do I agree with how the client responded to him. There's zero respect in those communications, but the situation itself is no longer happening, and I do support that. Okay, I had a client bring her 2-year-old grandson to a final inspection walkthrough after I specifically stated no children. Her daughter lived across the street from the listing, and she was visiting when the inspector showed up, so she walked across the street. I was speaking with the inspector, and her grandson goes running through the living room, trips on the inspector's ladder leg, and proceeds to fall forehead first onto a glass table corner. The grandmother starts screaming lawsuit. The kid is screaming bloody murder. The child's mother walks in behind yelling, trying to find out what her son is screaming about. Inspector and I try to calm everyone down and walk them outside, get a rag for the baby's head. They continue screaming and cursing in their native language, and now grandmother and client say that they're filing a claim against the seller's homeowner insurance. Client buys the home. Key point. 90 days go by. I get a call from the client who's upset that the homeowner's insurance seems high, and she can't seem to get any company to give her a quote. She didn't realize that the claim that she filed against the previous homeowner would affect her because it goes against the home that she bought. Oh gosh, this is so good. First of all, why would you say that children aren't allowed at a final inspection? That's odd to me, because whatever, we're not allowed to discriminate as agents. And I feel like while that's not specifically discrimination, I feel like that's borderline. So be very careful there. Secondly, as the daughter or the grandmother, whoever was in charge of that child, why were you letting a child run wild through somebody else's house? Look, I have 4, and I can say that they are not always properly behaved, but we also don't run screaming through other people's houses. And lawsuits, yes, if you file a claim against a house that you're buying, yes, you need to be prepared for the repercussions of that. I'm not an insurance agent. I don't know how the claims process works, full disclosure there, but shame on you. Who was your worst client? This will be my 2nd time working with my own parents, and let me tell you, I would rather be run over by a car 7 times. They want to write $400,000 under asking with no earnest money deposit. They also keep referring to their experience when they bought their house in the early 90s. I'd refer them out, but absolutely no one will work with their nonsense, nor will I ever want to torture anyone. Who was your worst client and what did they ask for? Oh, sometimes the people that we know the best are the hardest to work with because, oh, just because. Just because. They just are. They just are. They know what buttons to push. They know how you respond. It's just, yikes. Regardless of who the client is, I think that setting expectations for the market that you're in, $400,000 under asking, even in a slower market, is probably not going to fly, depending on the price point, of course. Who knows? Maybe they're buying mega millions. I don't know. Next one. I had a relative that I took to so many houses. They wanted an investment property, but wanted it cheap. We saw many, wrote offers, nothing stuck. They had a ton of equity in their house, so a lender suggested that they should refi their house in order to be in a position to offer cash. They freaked out and didn't want to do that. Okay, take a loan out for 20% down and the higher interest rate for a non-owner occupied. Their friends were suggesting that they lowball and if they got a counter, go lower. After about a year of this and then putting more weight into their friends' advice that was getting them nowhere, I told them I was not going to keep doing this. I mean, I have no words. I think you did the right thing there, right? Like if they're not realistic in their expectations, there's no point in continuing to work with them. Has there ever been any point of time in your career as a realtor that you have lost your temper with any of your clients that resulted in a verbal argument or a physical fight? We're professionals here. Like, is this a real question? Because anybody that loses their temper or gets in a fight with a client should not have their license moving forward. But apparently other people don't share this. And so let's dive into these. After 6 months on the market, one of my listings finally got an offer, full price. The seller refused to sign it. Said he just didn't feel right signing it. For 4 days, I tried to get him to sign. He tried to counter at a higher price. He wanted the buyer to pay for his deed preparation. And of course, he was not going to pay a buyer agent. Finally, I raised my voice and told him if he didn't sign it, I was terminating the listing and would pursue my commission. He stopped talking to me, found an attorney, communicated with me through the attorney from then on. It was the most bizarre thing. I'm like, you hired me to sell your house, and then I become the bad guy because I did what you hired me to do. That's weird, right? Like for 6 months, you try to sell a house and you go through the process of showing it and keeping it clean and doing all the things, and then the agent brings you a full price offer. And the only thing they ask you to pay for is to pay for the title policy, the deed preparation in this situation, which is a negotiable piece, but not unrealistic. As a seller, you want to communicate clear title to the buyer, so it's not an unrealistic ask. And in this situation, it doesn't specify, but he wanted the seller to pay the buyer agent compensation. And again, we don't know at what percentage or what rate or all the details here, but not an unrealistic ask. I have no words. I would also be frustrated. Like, that's what he hired you to do and you did it. And so I'm sorry that happened to you. That's terrible. I was new. I walked into our office early in the morning. I'd stopped to pick something up. As I was shutting the door, I bumped into a man with a backpack. He said he was looking for an agent. I said, well, it must be fake because here I am. Turns out he was kind of a psycho. He insisted on seeing only homes that were 100+ years old, off the beaten path with no road signs or lights. Thankfully, at each of our listings, the price point was high, so the listing agent met me there. Oh, thank God, because you would have gotten murdered. This is terrible. When we were quietly walking the perimeters of the property, a knife fell out of his pocket. The listing agent said he'd call to check on me. On the drive back to his hotel, he decided that he should lay his head on my chest while I'm driving on I-95. I took a deep breath, pulled into his hotel. As he got out, I think I sped away with a squeal noise. No idea if he ever bought a house. I think he just liked wasting my time and potentially could have been a serial killer. Okay, as male or female agents, really doesn't matter. We have got to take steps to protect ourselves because we broadcast ourselves on the internet and we basically say, here I am. This house is going to be open. This is what I look like. Come and see me. Nobody's home. Super dangerous profession. We show houses at night. We show lots of houses, so our family, spouses, friends don't necessarily know where we are at any given time. A lot of the homes are vacant, so people could already be inside of the home when we open it. There are so many risks to this profession. And as a new agent, you're just so happy to get a client. And I get it, and I've been there, and I feel for this person. But I kind of have a personal rule that I don't ride in cars with clients because if stuff goes wrong, I want to have an exit strategy. And I think that whatever your fail-safe is, whether somebody is always tracking you on, on an app on your phone, whether you check in with people at the end of every listing, whether you get pictures of driver's license before you do it, whether you have a pre-approval from a lender just to show that some level of validation has been done, there's just things that you have to do. I personally always park behind the client in the driveway if we're in driveways because I want to make sure that I can always get out if I need to. I never go up the stairs first. I always want to follow my clients up the stairs. And some people find this to be overly cautious or weird, but it's because things like this happen and you just never want to be in that situation. So Kel sells 5. I am really happy to know that you're okay because a knife falling out of somebody's pocket could be harmless, could be nothing, but also a client laying your head on the chest while driving to I-95 seems very, very weird. Super weird. Super weird. Super weird. Do you step in when a client is about to make a bad decision or do you just let them figure it out? It depends, okay? I have talked more clients out of homes than I can count, whether it was a bad deal, too many renos, or just something felt off. I once had a client ready to overpay by a mile. I walked them through the risks, what could happen if the market dipped, if the financing got tight, if they needed to sell sooner than planned. They ended up walking away, and a few months later, they found a better place for less. On the flip side, I spoke with an agent who told me, they're big boys and big girls, it's their money, I just write the offer. Totally different mindset. I get that we're not supposed to make decisions for our clients, but I've always seen it as part of the job to help them make smart ones, even if it means losing out on a deal in the short term. What about you? Do you step in when things feel off, or do you just give the facts and let them decide? Launch your farm. I'm with you, right? Like they hire us to be experts in this field. If they knew how to do it themselves, then they would do it themselves. And that's why we see all these people for sale by owner and representing themselves. And sometimes they know what they're doing and sometimes they don't. That's a whole nother conversation. To the agent who said they're big boys and big girls and it's their money, shame on you. Truly shame on you, because you just said in that you're only after the commission. That's not what we're in this profession to do. If a client is buying their first home and it looks pretty because it's already been flipped, but you walk in and you see that it's just lipstick on a pig because there's so many of those out there, it's your obligation not to point out what's wrong with it because that's the inspector's job. It's your obligation to share with them that seller might have covered some things up, and what really we need to see is what's behind the lipstick. And that sometimes inspectors can find that and sometimes they can't. And you don't have to be the expert. You just have to give the guidance towards the expert so that the expert can give them their professional opinion. If you are only chasing the paycheck, it's gonna run out. It's eventually gonna run out. If you are only treating the client like you just want the money out of the deal, they're never gonna refer you because you're not doing a good job for them. Shame on you. Like that comment right there gets me so worked up because that's the reason that people treat agents as if we're no good. And I think that so many agents do such a great job. People don't ever get a chance to experience it because they had a bad experience like that. So cheers to you, launch your farm, whoever you are. I think you're doing a great job. I absolutely think that you should give advice when it's asked for. You should not be afraid to give them the hard truth. I have lost a client or two by giving the hard truth because they felt like I didn't support them in their decision, and that's fine. I would rather sleep at night and lay my head down comfortably knowing that I did not pursue a paycheck over the right thing. So cheers to you. Wow. Some of these stories are great, and it is exactly what we deal with day in and day out. And it's so fun, and it's humiliating. The poop story, I mean, it just is what it is. Some of it's terrifying, right? When it comes to the safety of agents as we show homes to strangers. But a lot of these are just things that I couldn't have fathomed in my wildest dreams. And if they happen to me, I might quit tomorrow. So thank you guys for sharing your wildest stories. If you've made it this far, I appreciate you watching. Today was supposed to be a little bit fun, a little bit different, just kind of having fun with our industry because why not? So thanks for sharing. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.